Now, it wasn't just defensive walls that went up around Kells, and the long since gone tower known as Lacey's Tower that were built in Kells. Around the countryside as well, in smaller areas, parishes, defensive homes or Norman towers went up as well. Examples being Siddenrath, Ballarat, Carlinstown, Fordstown, Atboy, and Delvin being an example where there was a pretty large one. Gilbert the Nugent, who was Hugh de Lacy's his brother-in-law, he built a tower that still stands there today, probably very, very similar to the one that stood in Kells until the 19th century. Now, de Lacy himself had pretty powerful notions and in the end was pretty unpopular with Henry II. Henry sent his young son John as Lord of Ireland to Ireland in 1176 and met de Lacy in Kells in order to try and put a stopper on de Lacy's plans of grandeur. But de Lacy went so far as to marry Rose O'Connor, the sister of Rory O'Connor, the last de facto High King of Ireland. So Henry was quite relieved when Hugh de Lacy died in 1186, struck on the back of the head with an axe in Durrow, probably in revenge for killing Tiernan O'Rourke in early 1170s when taking over Meath. Following Hugh, he had his two sons, William and Hugh Jr., who got in quite a lot of trouble themselves. John had to come back to Kells in 1210, chasing down the two brothers and their in-laws, the de Broses, who had put him in a lot of serious trouble in England, something John never recovered from in the end. So we continued on that path. In 1315, you had the Battle of Kells fought between Edward the Bruce, brother of the victorious Robert, victor at Bannockburn the previous year, who fought against Roger Mortimer, who had inherited the land in Meath through the Lacy line and marrying a Lacy descendant. Now he ultimately became known as England's greatest traitor, was hung for the murder of Edward II in 1330. So Kells again in the midst of it. That particular battle, there's not a lot recorded on it, but it was probably pivotal for the people that were involved and the family members involved, the most important people in Ireland and in England at the time. Right up into the War of the Roses, Kells again finds itself in the thick of it because the Richard of York, who sought to take the throne of England from Henry VI, he had based himself in Meath before setting forth in 1460 to try and take over the throne in England. So again, Kells had repercussions from that. Actually, Henry VI wrote a letter to the traders in Kells asking them specifically not to support Richard of York. You know, in Tudor times, actually Henry VIII inherited most of the large estates in Meath, including land around Kells here, because he was the son of the last Princess of York, who had married his father Henry VII. So during Tudor times, we were very much in the thick of it too. Henry reorganised the Pale, the English defensive area in Ireland, starting at Kells in the 1530s, and we have direct orders coming from Henry's military command on what should be done in Kells to reinforce the walls and to militarise the town and the local community as well. And again, this is a pivotal place in English security in Ireland, and so right through Elizabeth's reign as well, we have attacks on Kells, a very important one in 1599 when the O'Reillys attacked Kells and up to 50 of them were killed on the street there in Cannon Street. And into the Cromwellian Wars, it was actually in Kells in 1642, prior to the full rising in Ireland, that the northern Irish chieftains met with the Anglo-Normans from the south of Ireland to make a pact, which was later signed into the Confederation of Kilkenny. Now, the reason Kells was picked was very important to the Irish chieftains. They were led by the Earls of Tyrone, the O'Neills. And while we may not remember today, their great matriarch, Gauntlet, was buried in the churchyard in Kells in the 10th century, she a daughter of one of these very important high kings. So when they came here in 1642 to swear war, not on Charles I, the King of England, but on the Puritan Parliament, they saw as treasonous. It was by no chance that Kells was picked. Now, after these wars, we all know what happened in terms of all of Ireland, with Cromwell's resettlement of Ireland. And most of the long established names around the Kells area, which had been here for centuries under Norman rule, they disappeared. To a greater or lesser extent, their estates were all taken away. Plunketts, Cusacks, Flemings, Bethigs, names like this that are still familiar around Kells today. They pretty much lost everything. Now, us local people, poor people, we weren't forced away with Cromwell's "to hell or to Connacht" motto, because the new settlers needed someone to work around here. And our ancestors remained on here for a long time after that. So the man that took control of Kells around this time was a man called Thomas Taylor, and he was he was probably the senior engineer on the whole Downsavor project, the maps that helped Cromwell distribute the land in Ireland. And he was a very canny man with a long family history of canniness, on being on the right side every time. And over space of his lifetime, into the early 1700s, he bought up any land he could find around the Kells area in the Blackwater River Valley. And it wasn't difficult to do, because most of Cromwell's soldiers and adventurers were very quick to sell up around here. And we can see where they were all settled. If you go out the roads towards Carlinstown as a perfect example, out towards Mullahay there, or Normanstown, you see the long narrow straight roads there in the countryside, and square fields, square edged fields. That's all from Cromwellian strings, lands given to Cromwell's soldiers. Now, Kells found itself in a different position when King James and King Billy met on the Boyne in 1690. Just before that, King James had ordered that the Protestants of Dundalk be given safe passage to Kells, within the walls of Kells. So Kells was probably the only safe haven in the area at the time. James's troops were all up around this area, and William's troops coming from the north were also harrying into this area as well. So they call it foraging for food, but they were robbing all the farmers to feed the armies. And this is where we get one story with the Hill of Lloyd. There was similarly an officer by the name of Lloyd, who was part of the Enniskillen Fusiliers, who raided down as far as here, and somehow the hill got the name from him. That's not true at all, but that's a story for another day. It was actually Thomas Taylor and his descendants who actually built the town of Kells we know today. The market square never existed until they appeared. It was an open market square until the 1740s, when the walls of Kells came down after any real threat of any Irish rebellion disappeared. But even with the walls gone, Kells remained a hotspot. And in the centuries following that, right up until Irish independence, Kells remained a very important place in terms of who was here and why they were here. Daniel O'Connell held 2 monster rallies in Kells here. Charles Stewart Parnell was also an MP here. And when the Land League was formed, and most of the senior male members of the Land League were imprisoned in Kilmainham jail, the women took over. And the set of books they kept on the Land League, who was being evicted and who was needed rent money and who needed food money throughout Ireland, these set of ledgers they called the Book of Kells. So throughout history, we have always been remembered. And somehow we've forgotten it all in recent decades or in the last century. I don't know why. But as I say, I hope now I haven't bored you to tears, and that you'll have a look at the videos and maybe got involved with the live streaming, or if you have any questions, let me know. The most important thing to remember is that this place has never stopped for anyone. It's not an ancient run-down monastery or broken down castle. It's not somewhere on the side of the road. It was built by the most important people in Ireland thousands of years ago, and it has continued on no matter what has happened. We've been knocked, rebuilt, recycled, knocked, rebuilt, recycled. We continue, and we'll always continue. So don't worry about this coronavirus. We've been through far worse. I'll talk to you soon. Tug o' bogey, slán go fóill.